When you run Google Ads, you can't just build a bunch of campaigns and let them run as they are. Over the years, I've managed over $50 million in Google and Facebook ads, and I've learned that failing to optimize your accounts correctly is one of the fastest ways to waste your budget. So in this video, I'll show you exactly how to optimize a Google Ads search campaign the right way. Hey everyone, it's Axel here, and in today's video, I'm going to show you the exact process I use to optimize a Google Ads search campaign. And so before we get into it, there's two main rules I like to stick to when I optimize a campaign. Number one is don't over-optimize. So over-optimization is a thing. I like to optimize most of my accounts on a week-to-week basis. You don't want to be going into your accounts and making changes every single day. When you make changes and optimizations to your account, you want to give Google and the algorithm some time to adjust to the changes you've made, and that way it can kind of learn from what you've done and improve that way. Whereas if you're consistently making optimizations on a day-to-day basis, it'll be very hard for you to tell which changes worked, which ones did not work, and you're also not letting the algorithm learn in an efficient way. Rule number two is to always optimize for the end goal. So if you're doing e-com, that's probably a purchase. If you're doing lead gen, that's probably a lead. What I mean by this is if you're doing lead gen, for example, you want to be optimizing around your cost per lead or the total number of leads you've got. Even though metrics like CTR and your CPM and things like that are important, they are not what you want to focus your optimizations around because they are not what the end goal of the campaign is. As long as your end goal is within target or doing better, then you're doing great, and it's what you should be optimizing your results along. So try and not get distracted with all your other metrics. Have one goal in mind and try to always optimize around that single goal. Now let's get started. So the first thing I like to do is just to check the overall performance of the account for the past month. So in this example right here, I'm running Google Ads, specifically a search campaign for this hotel that's specifically in Canada. And what we're trying to do here is we're just running search ads to get this hotel more bookings. So I like to look at a few different metrics to see how these ads are performing. Specifically, the first one I like to use is my cost. So I like to see how much the account is spending and seeing if this is matched well with how much we're currently spending on the ads as a budget. I can see that my budget for this campaign right here is $12.45 a day. And in the past month, it spent $362. Now, if everything is set up correctly on a search campaign, your budget should spend entirely. If it's not, you might have a billing error, you might have a disapproved ad, or you might have another issue in your account, which is preventing this from happening. But as I can see, if I multiply $12.45 times 30, I get about $362 a day, meaning that my budget is entirely spending, and so everything looks good on that front. The next thing I like to look at are my end goals, essentially. So how many purchases did we acquire from this? What's my ROAS, and what's the conversion value behind this? So in this case right here, in the past 30 days, I can see that we got a total of 4 different hotel bookings. That gave us a conversion value of about $2,200, which is really good considering we only spent about $360, and I can see that this is resulting in a direct ROAS of about 600%, essentially meaning that for every $1 we're spending on this search campaign right now, we are getting $6 back in revenue, which is super good. Just through a quick analysis like this, I can see that the account is performing up to par and that it's doing very well. I might want to also check some other metrics, including my CTR, for example. So I can click this drop down right here just to get a good gauge on what that looks like, and my conversion rate as well to see if there's any improvements that could be done on that front. But generally speaking, when you're running search ads, I would label anything above a 7% as a CTR to be good, and anything above a 10% to be extremely good. Currently, we're seeing a CTR of about 9.9%, essentially signaling to me that whatever keywords we're using, it's lining up very well with the ad copy and the ad itself that we're showing people, because a lot of people are clicking on the ad. So that looks good. And then the conversion rate is at 4%. For the hotel industry, I would label this as being quite high as well, essentially meaning that what our ad looks like is probably very relevant to the landing page that we're bringing people to, and that the landing page is converting people in an effective way. And this directly signals to me that it's doing well, because it has now resulted in a 6x ROAS, because they both have a direct correlation to each other. So overall, I just like to do a quick sweep of what my account metrics look like, see if it's doing well compared to the previous month, and see what the overall status of the account is. Once I'm done doing that, I like to look at the specific ads I'm running and seeing if they're relevant and if they can be improved in some way or another. So to do this, I would essentially select the campaign I'm currently trying to optimize, which is this one right here, and I would click on campaigns right there and then click on ads to see the individual ads. So for this campaign specifically, we actually have a very simple setup. We only have one ad group and then one ad within that ad group. And so what you want to do here is scroll through your ads. You might have more than one, that's totally fine. And what you want to check is your ad strength specifically, and Google will label this as either poor, average, good, or excellent. What you want to do is you want to make sure that your ad strength is always on good or on excellent. So I can see right here in this account that currently we're on an average. So I want to go into this ad, make a couple edits in order to bump that up. And so to do that, what I can do right here is I can click this pencil icon, go into my responsive search ad, and from here, Google are going to directly label what it is I need to do in order to bump up this ad quality. If I click the X on here right there, I can see that my ad strength is currently on an average, and it's giving me suggestions on the right. So what I'm currently doing well, according to Google, is I'm adding more headlines. So I have a bunch of different headlines which I'm testing, so that's good. And also our descriptions are unique. The two areas of improvement that Google is labeling me to improve on are including popular keywords in my headline and making my headlines more unique. So we essentially have a lot of headlines, we have a lot of descriptions, but it just wants the headlines to be more unique. So what we want to do right now is find a way to do that while keeping your ads relevant to the keywords. This is super important. You don't want to just apply these changes because Google tells you to. You want to make sure that your ad copy is still relevant to the keywords, because if it's not relevant to the keywords in the first place, then people are not going to click on your ads and then your CTR is going to go down. So make sure you apply these recommendations, but make sure you do it in a relevant way that still applies to the keywords that you are targeting. So I just skipped ahead, but in order to improve this, what I did here is I swapped out and modified a couple of headlines. So down here, what I did is I added one extra headline labeled as top hotels in Penticton. That's because Google recommended an option that was similar to this and I thought it was relevant to the keywords I'm targeting, so I added it in. I also added a keyword dynamic headline because Google seems to like those and they can tend to perform pretty well if you're using the correct keywords. And then on top of that, I went up here and I added the abbreviation BC after Penticton because that's the province that Penticton is in, and we are actually using BC in one of our keywords. So that's essentially tying the ad headline more closely to one of my keywords. And then from there, after all three of those changes, since I added more headlines, made them more relevant to the keywords themselves and made them somewhat more unique between each other, Google has now changed my ad strength to good. So from here, I can go down here and click on save and leave it as it is. Now, this is important for a few reasons because this ad strength is what is pretty much telling Google and the algorithm if your ad is of good quality or not. And usually if your ad strength is of good quality, it'll often give you a direct benefit from that by giving you either a lower CPC or a higher CTR to your ad, which are both good to the performance. This used to matter a lot less 5 or 6 years ago, but in more recent years, Google has enforced this quite a bit more and has enforced the fact that a better ad strength is definitely correlated to higher ad performance. So make sure that when you go through your account, just check all of your ads and make sure that all your ads are on either a good standing or excellent. They don't have to be on excellent. Sometimes it can be very tricky to tweak all your headlines to make them excellent, but make sure they're at least on a good standing, and then from there, just click on save. Also, once you have your ads on an ad strength of good, don't just ignore it down the line. Be sure to check back in on this because sometimes also Google will change their definition of what a good ad is. And so sometimes you might have an ad that is labeled as good or excellent, but over time, the algorithm might change a little bit and that good standing might turn into an average standing after 6 months. So you always want to repeatedly check in on these things. Make sure that the standing is still the same as what you previously set it to. Now, the other thing you want to check within your ad level is the conversion rate of your ads. A high conversion rate usually means that your ad is showing something very relevant to the landing page you're bringing people on. And if things are relevant, your conversion rate should be high and your cost per result should be low, which is a good thing. And so you always want to go into this and check your conversion rates. I'm currently running one ad right now, but if you're running multiple ads within an ad group, for example, you want to check your conversion rates and see if there is an ad that is performing below the other ones. So what you can do here is you can scroll right and I can see that for this month, my conversion rate is at 4.29%. I'm perfectly happy with this, so I don't really necessarily have to change anything with the ad copy or the landing page itself because that is returning a ROAS of about 6x right now. But let's say you have 3 different ads and they are labeled as a 5%, a 5%, and a 1% conversion rate. What you would want to do from there is try and label why that 1% or why that lowest converting ad has such a low conversion rate. And usually this is associated to 2 different reasons. Number 1, your ad copy is not relevant to your landing page. So whatever you have written down on your ad has to be highly relevant to what you're bringing your traffic to. And the second reason is your landing page might not be optimized for paid traffic in the first place. So make sure that your website is functional, that it's fast, that your form is easy to use, that your landing page headline is convincing, things of the sort. You just want to make sure that your landing page is relevant and fully functional compared to the other ones that you're running. So make sure you just check your conversion rate for every single ad. If one of them is low, try and figure out why that is and try and fix that. So that's all done for the ads. The next thing I like to do is doing bid adjustments. So within Google Ads, there's 3 different types of bid adjustments you can do. You can do it on a device level, location level, or audience level. So I'm going to show you how to do all 3, and we'll start with the device one because it's the easiest one to do in my opinion. To see your devices, what you want to do is click on Insight and Reports, click on when and where my ads are showed, and then click on devices right here. And so what Google will tell you is where your ads are being shown, specifically on which device, so a mobile phone, a computer, and a tablet, and it'll show you the individual performance for each. Now, I like to look at this stuff because chances are that the performance for each one will be different. But before I do this, I always like to set a larger time frame. And so I like to look at this for the past 90 days. So I can go down here, click at 90 days all the way up to today and click on apply. And I like to look at 90 days because doing a bid adjustment is something that you should only be doing if you're 100% sure of your decision, because making the wrong move when it comes to this can end up in a pretty negative result on your account. So I like to look at more data in order to make sure that the decision I'm making when it comes to making a bid adjustment is correct. Now you might be wondering, what is a bid adjustment in the first place? Let's say as an example that I have my mobile phones and my computers, and that my computers are performing better than my mobile phones. What I can do is I can tell Google, spend more money and bid higher on my computers. That way I bring more money to the ads from the computers and less money from the phones. That way the thing that is performing better will start spending more money, and the thing that's performing worse will start spending less on the account, which should directly bring your cost per result on average down for the account, which is what we're trying to do. So that's kind of what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to look at the previous 90 days and look at my results for all three. So like I said, I always like to optimize around one main goal, and in this case it would be a cost per conversion. So I can see that for my mobile phones, my average cost per conversion is $28. For my computers, it's at $30, and then for tablets, it's $0, and I spent $7. So this one spent $7 in the past 90 days and it didn't convert. So this one's slightly irrelevant because I spent way less on this one than the other two. So the main two I want to focus on right now are my phones and my computers. So I can see that out of these two, my phones are converting slightly, but only very slightly better than my computers. So what I can tell Google now is to spend a little bit more on the mobile phones and a little bit less on the computers. And I can do that by doing a direct bid adjustment. So if I go on the left here, I have my bid adjust column where I'm currently spending plus 5% on phones and plus 10% on the computers. And that's because I've already made bid adjustments on this account. But what I can do here is I can up this bid adjustment because this one's performing well, and I can lower this one right here because this one's performing not as well. And so I can up this one from 5% to 6%, and I can decrease this one from plus 10% to 9%. And by doing that, what I'm telling it now is to essentially spend more money and to bid more on the mobile phones and less money on the computers, assuming that since the phones are doing well and I spend more on them, then my account total cost per conversion should go down because it's spending more on something that is working better. So that's kind of like the data-driven process on how you should be doing this. Keep in mind though that when you do a bid adjustment, do it very incrementally. So let's say you just started running some Google ads and you see that your mobile phones are converting at, let's say, $20 per lead, and your computers are converting at, let's say, $40 per lead. So your phones are doing twice as good. Don't go in here and just give a bid adjustment of 50% right off the bat. You want to be doing your bid adjustments incrementally. So what I mean by this is, instead of doing a bump of 50%, for example, do a bump first of, let's say, 5 or 10%, check in a week, see how the results are, and then readjust from there. Quite often, if you do a bid adjustment that is too aggressive, it can often turn a positive result into like a negative one. So the same thing applies to locations. I can do a bid adjustment on the different locations I'm targeting. So if I scroll down here and click on the audiences, keywords and content, I can click on my locations here, and I can see that for this campaign, I'm targeting a few different locations, and I can see a cost per result for each one. And what I can do here is the exact same idea as the devices. I can do bid adjustments depending on how each of these locations are performing. If I order this by cost per conversion, what's useful when doing this is you can see which one's your worst performer at the top or which one's costing you the most per result, and then the one at the bottom is usually your best performer because it's getting the most efficient result. I can see here that the city of Kelowna is achieving a cost per conversion of about $42, whereas my average is at 30. So this one is about 33% higher than my average, whereas the one down here for Vancouver is currently converting at $19, which is about 30% lower than my average. So this one's doing really well. This one's still doing okay, but it is the worst out of the 6. What I can do is I can tell Google to spend slightly less on this and slightly more on this one. So this one's currently bid adjusted to -50. It's because it used to perform not so well, but more recently it's been performing better and better. That can be due to many different reasons, but what I can do is I want to essentially raise this -50 to a higher amount. What I can tell Google now is to increase this from, let's say, -50 to -40. That way it's a bid adjustment of plus 10%. And what I'm essentially telling Google here is spend more money on this one because it's getting a very efficient cost per conversion. And so by raising it from -50 to -40, I'm directly telling it to spend more money on this, assuming that if it spends more money on this, my account average cost per conversion should go down because it's spending more money on what's working. The same applies to my worst performer. So the one up here is currently bid adjusted to -25% and it's still doing the worst. So this one I might tell Google, hey, lower this to -35. I already adjusted it by -25%, but it's still not achieving the result I wanted to. So I'm now telling Google, spend even less money on this. That way you can focus on spending more money on the ones that work. And then from there, I like to look at all the ones in the middle. So I can see that these two down here are performing quite a bit under the average. And then this one right here is spending slightly above the average. So for this one right here, I could lower this bid adjustment, but not quite as much as the previous one. So I can make this from plus 10% to, let's say, plus 8%. And then for these two down here, I can raise them slightly. So I can maybe bid adjust this by plus 2% and then change this one from a plus 10 to a plus 12. So that's a bid adjustment. It's the same idea as the devices. What you're essentially telling Google is to spend more money on the ones that are working and a bit less money on the ones that are not working as well. Finally, I'm quickly gonna go over the audiences. You can do the same thing within your audience segmenting. So if I click on this table right here, I can see that for this campaign, I'm targeting specifically on an observation level 4 different audience types, which are right here. And I can do bid adjustments on each of them because Google is telling me the direct result for each one. So I can see here that my average is at $29. This one up here is converting at $29. So I probably don't want to touch this one. This one's at $28. So it's performing slightly better than the average, but only very slightly. So on a bid adjustment, I probably wouldn't want to touch this either. And then this one down here converted at $3.13. So this one's working quite well. However, I would not want to do a bid adjustment on this because this only happened one time in the past 90 days. And that is not an accurate representation of what is actually happening in the account. If this were to say 10 or 20, I would probably bid adjust this upwards and make it spend more money on this audience because it's clearly working well. But it's always something you want to check on. If you're looking at your cost per conversion, always check the volume of conversions you actually got and that you have a meaningful amount to actually make that call. Because if you only have 1 or 2 conversions, that is usually not enough information to tell you that that information that you're seeing is accurate in the first place. So for this example right here, I'm not going to touch anything, but within the audiences, you can apply the same logic that I used within my devices and locations and apply it to your audience segmenting. So that's it for my bid adjustments. The next thing I like to do when optimizing a Google Ads account is look at the performance of my individual keywords. So what I can do here is I can click on keywords and then start looking at the different keywords I'm targeting and the performance for each one. What I like to do here is see if I can find any keywords that are severely underperforming compared to the other ones and my total average cost per conversion in total for the account. Usually what I like to do is scroll down, look at the cost per conversion for each one and see if I can find any specific keyword that is way above my average cost per conversion, or a keyword that is spending a lot and not converting, or a keyword that has an unusually high CPC. And what I like to do is find these types of keywords, potentially eliminate them, because if you eliminate a keyword that is spending way too much money and not providing a good result in return, all it's going to do is it's going to push more money into the keywords that are working and therefore bringing your cost per result down. So that's kind of the goal here. It's always to bring the cost per conversion down. And so what I can do here is I can start looking at the cost per conversion for each of my keywords. So if I go at the very bottom, I can see that my cost per conversion on average is at $28. And so I can see if I order this by total number of conversions they got each, that this one got an average of $20, $34, $38, and $19. And so there isn't a single keyword in this list that I would label as having a cost per conversion that is way higher than the other ones. And so for that reason alone, I don't really want to pause any of those, but I still want to double check just to make sure. The second thing I want to check is scroll down past here until I hit the zeros. And so a cost per conversion of 0 does not mean you are getting a result for free. It just means you have not gotten a conversion. And what I want to do on this stage is scroll to the right and look at my cost column because I want to see how much that keyword spent and not convert. And so I can see that this one did not convert, but it also spent $0. So that's fine. I can just let it as it is. Same thing with this one down here. Same thing with this one here and same thing here. However, I can see that my bottom keyword spent $19 and did not convert. For the same reason as before, I'm actually not going to pause this keyword because this is still below my average cost per conversion. So if it got a couple more clicks and then converted, it would probably be within the range I want it to be. However, if I saw this number as like a $200 mark or something of the sort, I would probably want to pause this because all it's doing is spending a lot of money and not providing a result in return. So if I pause this, that extra money would start being spent on my keywords that are working well and probably bring my average cost per result down in the account. Finally, I like to just check my overall cost per click for each of these keywords and see if there's any of them that are unusually high. So right now, this one is currently running at an average CPC of $2.85, which is okay. This one's at 73 cents, $2.60, $2.50, and 0.64. So there is a pretty big range between all of these. However, $2.50 is an amount I'm comfortable with on an individual keyword. And so for that reason as well, I would not pause any of these keywords. However, if I saw a keyword was not providing a good result and had a cost per click of, let's say, $10, then that's something I probably would want to pause. So that's kind of what you're doing here. You're kind of just trying to figure out which keywords are not working well, which keywords are spending a lot and not working, and then which keywords are providing a cost per click that is too high for your liking, and go ahead and potentially pause those. However, keep in mind that if you pause a keyword, try to replace that keyword with a new one, so then you're constantly testing. If you don't know how to find keywords that are good to test, you can check the link below. I made a whole video on how to use the Google Keyword Planner, and from there you can kind of find all sorts of new high converting keywords that are potentially applicable to your business, so make sure to check that out. But what you want to do is, if you ever pause a keyword, try and always replace it, because if you pause a keyword, what you're doing is you're putting a bunch more money into the other keywords. And this is dependent on the situation, but sometimes those keywords are currently working, but they can't necessarily work on a higher budget, because all that's going to happen is if you're forcing more money onto a keyword, sometimes the only way for Google to spend the money on that keyword is to show it to more and more and more irrelevant searches that are less and less associated to that keyword. And so often when you pause keywords, you might see that your cost per conversion for the other keywords that you did not pause might go up, which is not a good thing. So what I like to do is, if I pause a keyword, I always try and find a good replacement. That way you're spending some of your budget allocated to a new test as a new keyword within your campaign. So that's it for the keywords. The next thing you want to do is check your search terms and add the appropriate negative keywords. But before we do that, if you're liking this video so far, be sure to give it a like and a subscribe. That way you're updated on all my future videos to come. So now what we want to do is look at the search terms. So to look at the search terms, what I can do is click this menu option up here and click on search terms. And so what this will do is it'll show you exactly what the search queries are when people are seeing and clicking on your ads. And so essentially what you want to do here is you want to look through all of your search terms and try and find anything that is irrelevant to what you are promoting, and then add negative keywords in a way that makes sense. That way you are essentially eliminating all the irrelevant traffic from seeing your ads in the first place. This is probably the most important step in the optimization process. It's the one that takes the longest. However, if you do this correctly and often, you're essentially going to be showing your ads to more and more relevant traffic over time. Your ads are probably going to get a higher CTR and a higher conversion rate because of doing this, and your direct cost per result should go down. So make sure you do this often, because it's the most important part of the optimization process. When I do this step, I actually don't like to look at a 90-day profile. I like to look at the previous 7 days, and that's because I look at my search terms on a week-to-week basis. So if I looked at my search terms a week ago, found all of my relevant search terms and added my negative keywords accordingly, since that search term has been added as a negative keyword, it will not come up again, and therefore I don't have to check for that period anymore. So if you're optimizing on a week-to-week basis, you can just check this window on a 1 week time frame. If you're optimizing, let's say, only just once a month, then make sure that you're checking this on a 1 month window. Whatever time frame you're optimizing on and how often you're optimizing, that should be equal to the time frame you're looking at this data for. And so what I want to do here is essentially look at my search terms by looking at them through the order of clicks. What I want to do is I want to just scroll through this now and see if there's anything irrelevant I can find. So right now we're promoting a hotel called Kettle Valley in Penticton. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to try and find things that are irrelevant. So this one right here, it's people searching up Kettle Valley Beach Resort. So I can see that that is pretty much exactly what I am advertising. So this is totally fine and it's totally relevant. So this is not something I would want to touch. Same thing with this. This hotel is in Penticton, so this is just people searching up for hotels in Penticton, so I want my ads to show up when someone is searching that. And then the same thing applies here. So what I want to do is quickly scroll down and see if I can find anything that is not relevant to my ad. And so by scrolling, I found this, days in Penticton reviews. This is somewhat associated to what I'm doing, but it's not very relevant. So if I find something relevant, I like to put a check mark. So I'm going to keep scrolling and see if I can find some other ones. Here's another one, Hotel Skaha Lake. So this hotel right here is not in Skaha. So what I can do is select this one right here. I can see that a similar one popped up right here, but I'm not going to tick this box and you'll see why in a minute. But if you see two things which are irrelevant for the same reason, for this example, it's because of Skaha Lake and that this is not in the correct location, then I only need to tick this box once and I'll show you how to deal with these both at once. And by scrolling, I found a third and final one down here, this conference center, Lakeshore one right here. This is not super relevant to what it is we're trying to do. And so now I have essentially gone through my entire list, and what I should do next now is add as negative keywords. So as you can see here, I selected 3 different search terms that I did not find relevant, and now I'm going to add them accordingly as a different type of negative keyword depending on what it is they say. So I usually like to add my negative keywords as either a negative phrase match or a negative exact match, and the reason I use both is slightly different. For this one right here, we found that days in Penticton reviews is not relevant to what we're doing, and so what I can do is I can leave this on an exact negative keyword, and what you're essentially telling Google if you leave leave this on an exact negative keyword is if anyone types this in the future, then my ad will never show anymore, which is essentially excluding all of this irrelevant traffic that might come up in the future and only going to show your ads to hopefully some more relevant traffic instead. Hotels on Skaha Lake. Now, like I mentioned, there were a couple other Skaha ones down the list. And so instead of using a negative exact keyword, what I can do is I can delete this part right here, and I can delete this part right here and put quotation marks around Skaha instead, essentially meaning now that I'm adding Skaha as a phrase match negative keyword. Now what it's telling Google is instead of telling it if someone types in exactly this, don't show my ad, what you're telling it instead is if anyone searches something related to Skaha, then don't show my ad. So that's why I didn't tick the two boxes at once, because they were both irrelevant for the same reason, which was this irrelevant location here. So by telling it to not show my ads when the word Skaha is included, I'm eliminating both irrelevant searches at the same time. So that's why I used the phrase match negative as opposed to an exact match negative. And then finally right here, this one as well, I did not like because it was relevant. Specifically, I found it was irrelevant because of this word right here, which was conference center. So instead of adding this as a negative keyword that is on exact match, I can add the word conference like this. And this will be a little bit better in my opinion because I saw a couple other searches that had to do with a conference and neither of them were relevant. And so by adding this on a phrase match negative, I'm now telling Google that you should not show my ads to anyone who ever types the word conference in their search query. Once you're done doing that, click on save. These will now be added as negative keywords, and all it's going to do is it's now going to show your ads less often to irrelevant searches and therefore more often to more and more relevant searches, which should increase your CTR, increase your conversion rate over time, and directly impact your cost per result by bringing it down. Now there's a couple common questions I see come up when it comes to the search terms, and the first one is how many search terms should I look through? Should I look through all of them or only a few search terms? The answer is you're going to want to look through every single search term. So as you saw here, I only had 95 of them, which is not that many. It takes maybe 10 minutes to look through them, but depending on your budget size, you might see 1,000 search terms. And it's important that you look through every single one. It will be super tedious, but after the first time you do it, you will notice very quickly that the second time you do it, your search terms will be much more relevant. There might be less of them, but they'll be much more relevant, and therefore it'll take you less and less and less time every time you do it. But it's very important, especially the first time, that you do one big sweep, look through every single one of your search terms. If you find anything irrelevant, add them as a negative keyword like I just showed you how to do. Another small mistake I see some people making as well is they will look at their search terms until they hit this point where clicks turn into 0, and then they'll just stop looking at their search terms, assuming that since people didn't actually click on the ad and didn't actually spend money from these search terms, that they don't have to worry about them. In my opinion, this is a bit of a lazy approach. You should be looking at every single search term, and that's because even though people did not click on your ad, they still searched this and saw your ad in the first place. And if you start eliminating these irrelevant searches to people who did not click on your ad, what's probably going to happen is more relevant people are going to see your ad, which is probably going to bump up the CTR on average in your account. And usually a higher CTR is related, as Google says, to a better ad quality score and often rewards you with a lower cost per click. So by showing your ads to a more relevant audience in the first place should, because of that reason, bring your cost per conversion down as well. Keep that in mind when you're looking through your search terms. Don't just pay attention to the ones that got clicked on. Make sure you pay attention to every single one. So that's it for the search terms. The last final optimization I like to do is segment my data and see how my search partners are performing. And so the search partners, if I go into the campaign settings right here and then scroll down to where it says networks and click here, I can see that I'm not using the display network. I actually recommend you never use this one. However, you can see that I am using the search network. Now, keep in mind, I nowadays recommend that you don't turn this on either. However, in some specific cases, I like to turn this on, see if it works well or not, and then from there, make a decision on if I should keep it on or not. And the way you do that, if you're running search partners attached to your campaign, to check the results for these, what I want to do is go on my campaign dashboard by clicking my campaigns down here, and then I want to segment my data specifically by network with search partners. And then I like to look at this kind of like a bid adjustment over the last 90 days to see if I'm getting an accurate representation or not. So I can click on 90 right here and click apply. And now what you're going to see is that it's showing my direct campaign results, but it's also segmenting it between the Google search and the search partner specifically. And so what I want to see is the cost per conversion for both and see how they compare to each other. And I can do that by scrolling on the right here. The regular Google search is currently hitting a cost per conversion of $29.75, which is pretty much exactly the same as my account total, which is $29.76. However, my search partners, I can see that it spends $0. However, it also only spends 16 cents. So this is a bit of a different case, but what you want to be doing here essentially is checking your search partners. And if you see one of two things, then you want to turn them off. Number one, if you see that your cost per conversion here is quite high and it's quite a bit above your average, you want to go into your settings and turn them off because they're clearly not working very well. well. Or the second scenario is you can see that it's not converting and let's say spending a lot. In a case like that, you also want to turn them off. So this is not currently happening in this account right now, but let's say that this was a 0 and this right here was, I don't know, something like $50 or more. Then what I would want to do is go back into my campaign settings by clicking on my settings right here, going back to my networks, and then removing this box right here and then clicking on save. For now, I don't have to do that, so I can leave it with the search partner running, but keep that in mind because a lot of the time your search network will not perform as well as your Google search. And in a lot of cases as well, I've seen Google ads pushing a lot of money into the search partner, even though it's not working well. And so if that's the case, be sure to keep a very close eye on it. And if it's not working, turn it off and run it without the search partners. And as a side note, if you're new to Google Ads and you have not built search campaign yet, I suggest nowadays that you just turn the search network off and you don't use it right off the bat because campaigns tend to perform better nowadays without it. So that's it for optimizing a search campaign. Hopefully from this video, you've taken away a lot of information. That way you can apply it to your own account and start optimizing your own ads yourself. However, I do understand that for some people, this process can be a little bit overwhelming, or for some people that you simply just don't have time to do it yourself. And so if that's the case and you'd like me to manage your Google Ads for you, you can feel free to use the link in the description below to book a call with me. But other than that, if you feel as if I missed a crucial optimization step in a search campaign, be sure to let me know in the comments. And apart from that, I'll see you on the next one.